Hello, my name is Mark Isles. Welcome to the School for Prophecy bi-weekly video blog. Today's subject is why are prophetic people intense? Why are prophetic people intense? It's not meant to be a rant or a conspiracy theory, but an experienced and biblical analysis of an important issue. So let's get straight into it. Prophetic people are often described by what I call the 7 I's: intense, independent, immature, insecure, idolatrous. And idolatrous is an odd one, but that's where prophecy is worshipped above everything else. Insensitive and isolated. I've heard all those terms and some more used regularly for prophetic people, but the most frequent criticism is that we are intense. Now, it's used as a negative connotation, but as I hope to show, while this can be the case, it's not always the case. And actually, we need to understand what prophetic ministry involves to grasp the fact that sometimes being intense in the right way is natural and even an inevitable consequence of prophetic ministry. However, let's not duck the issue. There are clearly some very bad consequences for the wrong sorts of intensity, which I hope to unpack. Now, I'm not really going into this subject in the sort of depth you'd need because I can't comment, particularly with specific cases, about the background of a prophetic person, their character, or any leadership conflict that they're involved in. And these 3 items and others will make a big difference on the intensity, what it is, and how it works out in a particular situation. First of all, let's dive into the healthy, inevitable intensity in prophetic ministry. And if you want to challenge me on this, I am merely using the dictionary definition of intensity so that there is some standard by which we can measure it by. And if you look up the dictionary definition of intensity, one of the things associated with intensity is very strong feelings. And these aren't bad. These are a naturally and healthy thing. And if you are moving in prophetic ministry and you're seeking prophetic words, it does become a real focus of your life. And actually, if we use the term passionate in here rather than intense, you can understand how that is going to be an inevitable part of prophetic ministry if prophetic people are taking the time to move supernaturally, move in faith, and trust God that they're bringing an important message because it's coming from our Heavenly Father to us. If you take Jesus as an example with his treatment of the Pharisees, very strong feelings or passionate, they're both in there. And it would be fair to describe Jesus' treatment of the Pharisees as intense. It was really cut and dried, for good reason too, but it wasn't a bad thing in that situation. I think we need to understand that bringing a prophetic word to the leadership who have authority and responsibility way beyond ours, or in the public where they're the pressures of the fear of man, needs really strong faith. So it's not unexpected for prophetic people to have an intensity that's associated with very strong feelings and hopefully is more to do with passion. The second area that the dictionary talks about intensity is that it's concentrated, it's intense, it's concentrated. And if I was to use the term focused, it wouldn't come across with the same negative connotation. But concentrated is where a prophetic person needs to be. They have one task, they have one message at that moment in time. If you take John the Baptist as an example, who was making straight the ways for the Lord, he was incredibly concentrated and focused on his task and wouldn't be set aside from it, which eventually cost him his life. His commitment and concentration was so strong in that case. And bringing a prophetic word requires making it a goal in your own life and a priority. So there is that element of concentration and focus, which is where the intensity works itself out in prophetic ministry. And the last one I want to bring out is that prophetic people in their intensity sometimes are zealous. This is very similar to passionate, but passion's more about the strong feelings. Zealous is caught up in a purpose, caught up in a mission, caught up in a task that Father has given to you. Now, commitment, a strong commitment, doesn't have the negative connotations that intensity has, but you've only got to look at Moses, another prophet, whose mission, both before the Red Sea and after the Red Sea, was very zealous and very focused. And it was only when Moses moved away from it that he did end up in problems. And there is a real zeal and commitment required to bring a prophetic word, particularly if you're not a member of a staff role in a church where you don't have the status and a platform, and you may be coming out of your own safety zone and your own comfort zone to bring a word. And there is often that zeal that comes across that is a healthy and natural part of the intensity that sometimes people feel in the prophetic ministry. Now, having said those things, we can't duck the issue that there are some very unhealthy aspects of intensity when the items that I've mentioned above, very strong feelings, concentration, and zeal, lead to an unhealthy concentration or intensity in a person's life. The first thing that can happen when intensity is taken too far is the prophetic ministry moves into exaggeration. That's when intensity is used to push an agenda beyond what it really is, trying to grab people's attention, or it may come out of the frustration of not feeling that you're being heard. And exaggeration is a bad thing, and it is part of how, when intensity is taken too far, it becomes that correctly negative connotation associated with people, where they are trying to grab attention or perhaps grab the limelight in a situation, and they exaggerate the importance of what they're doing beyond and in an unhealthy way around what other people are doing in the family community. Perhaps for me, one of the most important unhealthy aspects of intensity is when people in prophetic ministry lose perspective. Their intensity comes up to a level where they lose perspective of what they're bringing and how it relates to the current situation. It's almost as if it becomes all-consuming to them. And it generates an emotional energy in their lives that just doesn't match the importance or the content or the perspective in relation to the many other things that are going on. And one of the things that prophetic people don't seem to grasp is leaders are carrying many, many issues in their hearts and their minds at one time. And you come along with something which you try and blow out of all proportion, and it's not going to get a good reception. And it creates an unhealthy urgency in people's lives. And the last area where I think intensity is unhealthy and damaging to people is where the intensity in prophetic ministry takes things to an extreme. And that is where the prophetic ministry latches on to very extreme points of view. I guess in politics, you would talk about the extreme left and the extreme right. But in the prophetic, it's grabbing hold of emotionally important issues and then just taking them far too far in their consequences and blowing them out of all proportion. It's more than perspective. It's actually taking something to an extreme, which is even further than that situation. It results in unbalanced viewpoints. It will birth conflicts, and it damages both the prophetic ministry and the community that they're trying to serve. Intensity, unfortunately, is a common problem in the ongoing battle between leadership and prophetic people. That might sound like a controversial statement, but unfortunately, there's often a lot more conflict there than there is peace. There are good examples. There are fellowships working out under biblical prophetic culture. Perhaps some things to bear in mind is that there are two sides to every coin. There are two sides to every coin. It's a catchphrase that makes the point that there are 2 points of view, and we do need to learn to see the other person's point of view. And one of the things about the negative aspects of intensity, exaggeration, a loss of perspective, and taking things to extreme, moving in an extremist mentality, is that prophetic people lose sight of the other side of the coin, which is very important to take into consideration. And it's where you take into account the other side of the coin that you start to protect yourself from the dangerous aspects of intensity of going too far. Another catchphrase is "it takes two to tango." It just makes the simple point that actually for biblical prophetic culture to work out with or without intensity, both the leadership, the church family, and the prophetic people who have genuine ministries need each other. Neither one of them can do it on their own. They both need each other and need to work together. So there is at the moment a desperate need for both sides to step back and try and understand each other's point of view, very much the two sides to the coin, and find another way than the conflict that often exists. And speaking to the hearts and minds specifically of prophetic people, we need to learn to be more self-aware in our journey. And if we do so, we'll find that is the first step to prophetic culture actually being a real possibility in the church family that we are part of. That doesn't cover everything, but just there's my immediate thoughts on the issue, why are prophetic people intense, and brings out the fact that there are many natural and inevitable parts of prophetic ministry and healthy parts of intensity that will result through prophetic ministry, but there are also some very unhealthy, very damaging, and very conflict generating aspects of intensity that we need to avoid. Have you enjoyed this challenging blog? If you are, then please do subscribe to our bi-weekly video blog. Also, feel free to email me if you have a serious question, and I do emphasize serious question. And on our YouTube channel, there are video introductions to all 3 of the training courses that we run. Thank you very much.